if you think about these small businesses, they're extremely volatile, right? Like I made, I made the conclusion that all businesses are loosely functioning disasters, and some happen to make money. And that's one of the things we love about if you don't use debt, you actually welcome volatility. You get these big shocks up and down, but if you can withstand the down shocks, you get big upside shocks, right?
Forged in America. Forged in America.
Between my two full-time jobs, this whole podcasting does create some extra friction.
We could put him on the counseling couch and talk about the deep childhood wounds that cause him to want to do podcasts.
Ravin, I do love your IDF photo shirt you got on today. You picked that special?
Well, hey, look, Israel, we got to root for Israel these days, right? So I've got this.
So Brent, so I dragged Ravin with me on a trip to Israel. We needed a non-Jew to come along with us. And
I think
represent.
token was really the correct word.
Token was the proper term. Yeah, and we did some fun like photo training.
You've never seen Al happier than when someone's telling him to clear a room and shoot like a water balloon, but with like a real gun and a real bullet. So it's kind of
anyway, like you said,
okay.
We're wasting good material.
Okay. Welcome to Forged in America. As always, I'm Ravin Gandhi with my buddy Al Goldstein, and we are entrepreneurs who keep doing this podcast and every week, baby. And this week, Brent Beshore is our guest from Permanent Equity. It's a super cool private equity fund. They have $500 million AUM, but what I find amazing, they largely don't use debt, which we're going to talk about, which is a radical departure from the typical private equity structure. The other thing that I love about what Permanent Equity does, they basically do not take fees unless there are distributions or exits, which is a huge departure from the normal big private equity fund situation. And they have effectively a 30-year hold time, if not forever. So welcome, Brent, to Forged in America.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
No, Brent, thank you for joining. The first time I had heard about you and Permanent Equity was when you actually bought my friend Barbie's business, because these worlds are pretty small, selective search. And I didn't know I really didn't know anything about Permanent Equity at that time. And then a few of my business partners at Stoic Lane, which is also sort of a longer dated holdco non-private equity structure. A few of my business partners have gone to Capital Camp a number of times, and I've heard about you many times through that lens. So really fun to explore here. Thanks.
I thought you were going to say a few of your partners had gone to Selective Search to find a wife. That's what I was hoping.
That I'm not as familiar with, but maybe they have.
There you go. We don't talk about it.
Yeah, I know Barbie. Everyone in Chicago, I think, knows Barbie. So yeah, she is a steel trap. So I respect that.
Yeah, it's like, what's the first rule of Fight Club? We don't talk about Fight Club.
That's exactly right. You can talk about Fight Club. You just don't talk about who's in Fight Club.
Yeah.
There you go.
So in the intro, Brett, we were talking about how you basically started what became Permanent Equity almost 20 years ago. So did I hear something about you becoming a lawyer?
Well, I went to get my law degree, my MBA at Mizzou, and ended up meeting a girl, dropped out. I've joked on plenty of other podcasts that I'm the Forrest Gump of private equity. And I think people are like, oh, that's really self-effacing and humble of you. And I actually tell them the story and they're like, oh my God, you really are. Like, it's a miracle. I'm like, I agree. It's crazy. I had no idea what I was doing. I got a introduction from a mutual friend to a guy who, quote unquote, been left at the altar for the second time trying to sell his business. I made him an offer. He said, absolutely not. There's no way I'd ever sell it for that. I said, no problem. 7 months later, he calls me up and says, Brent, I'm exhausted. Business is in great shape. I don't want to do this anymore. I'll give it to you for the price you asked for, but you got to close 60 days from now. I said, okay. I called up my lawyer and I said, hey, what do we need to do? And he goes, oh, we just got to do diligence. And I typed into Google DO diligence. That's how little I knew. I knew absolutely nothing. In fact, I got 2 weeks out before closing, another true story. And I was like, wait a minute, if I give him all my money and he takes all his money out of the business, like, how do I make payroll? And so I called him up and he's like, well, you got a line of credit, right? I was like, no, I didn't get one of those. What do we do?
What is line of credit?
Yeah. And he was like, well, you can't buy the business. I was like, well, we're kind of all committed to this thing. Like, could you loan me the money? And so he actually loaned me the money to use as a working capital off the purchase price. And anyway, the rest is
So
history.
that's like a cousin of seller paper trading.
Yeah, unintentional. Truly, he knew that I wasn't trying to pull one over on him. I just was that stupid.
How did that first business actually turn out? Was that a good outcome?
Yeah, it's been amazing. We still own it today. In fact, we've sold one business in the history of the firm, and we actually sold a business about 5 weeks ago. Really great outcome, but we've never sold another business outside of that. So I still own that first business, and I own the second business we bought, and all the rest of them since.
So we've had a lot of guests on from different backgrounds and a lot of private equity type folks that have built these big funds, but that doesn't sound like that was your goal and it's not your goal. So
That's
were you
correct.
were you one of these guys that growing up said, okay, I want to start a business, I want to be an entrepreneur, or do you feel like you just kind of fell into it?
No, I really fell into it, and for me, it seems like that there's really two strategies when you're going to try to build a firm, right? You can either try to get the most AUM you can under management, get your fees up, and build like a big firm. In which case, as everyone would say, the returns are going to suffer as a result of that, right? The more capital you have, the more constrained you're going to be on returns. Or you just try to shoot the lights out in terms of total returns and stay smaller. We've always just had the mentality like we want to be investors, pure investors, not asset managers. And so we've intentionally kept what we've done fairly small in the grand scheme of things. It still feels like a lot for us, especially from where we came from. But yeah, we want to be focused on the lower end of the lower middle market. We're really looking, I'd say, sweet spot for us is businesses between 3.5, maybe $4 million of earnings on the low end, up to 10, 12 on the high end. We bought one business that's closing, it was 17 million of earnings, but I would say that was an outlier on the upside.
So how do you go from that first business, which has done well and you still own it, to building a fund that is pretty big? Not quite billions, but still a fund that's nearly half a billion of assets, but also 30-year time frame, which is not typical.
Yeah, so I wasn't, weirdly enough, I was not looking to fundraise, and I met a couple people who were family offices, and they said, "Hey, we'd love to put capital with you." I said, "Hey, I'm sorry, we don't take outside capital." And they kind of said, "Well, you should, and you should either do a holdco or you do traditional 2 and 20 structure." And neither of them were attractive for a variety of reasons. And then I met this guy on the internet named Patrick O'Shaughnessy when he was not the Patrick O'Shaughnessy that everyone knows. He was just some rando. And anyway, we met up and he said, "Hey, can I come visit you in Missouri?" We ended up chatting for, I mean, it felt like 15 straight hours. It was probably 10 straight hours. And at the end of it, he was like, "Look, I want my family to invest in what you're doing. I believe in it." And I said, "Hey, that's great. I'm going to tell you the same thing. I apologize, but we're not taking outside capital." And he said, "Well, you should." And I said, "No, we're not interested in doing a traditional fund. We're not interested in the holdco." And he said, "Well, why don't you just make it up then? What would it take for you to take capital?"
And
And I
why
was like,
were you,
"Well,
I guess, why were you not interested? For all the reasons that additional capital can get you more scale and can get you to be able to buy more companies?
yeah, well, I mean, everyone had said that no one goes that direction. Like, no one
Yeah.
actually has their own capital and does their own thing and then takes outside capital. Everyone takes outside capital to then return it to do your own thing. And I just heard nightmare stories of the pressures of the 2 and 20 10-year fund life. If we were going to do a holdco, I would have had to contribute basically everything I had built that to date into this new structure and basically take on a bunch of bosses. And I was like, why would I do that? Like, I don't want to do that. So neither of them were attractive. And then when Patrick challenged me, I was like, well, I'll think about it. And I went back, and it was about 3 days later, I presented to him and his father, and I said, "Look, here's what I'm thinking. We don't want any fees. I've already built the team. I want to be as closely aligned with my investors as I possibly can. I asked for 50 years of on the capital, and they originally said yes. And actually, the lead family that came in after them said yes. Funny story about how it got down to 30 years, but 30 years is still a long time. But it was 50 years, no fees. And I said, "Hey, I don't want to use debt." And they said, "Okay, like, let's go." And I said, "Well, what now?" And they said, "Well, we know a bunch of rich people." And I was like, "Well, that's good." And
Yeah.
they said, "Well, send us all your data." They actually created my first deck. Like, literally, they were a huge blessing for me. I owe a lot of my career to them just being willing to be kind and generous and
And
come
and that
alongside me.
sounds that was like serendipity of meeting them and just
Pure
having it be a
serendipity.
great partnership.
Pure
It
serendipity. Just be
we,
open.
you know what we've had in a number of our conversations, this has been my experience, Ravin, probably similar, is just this random connectivity of this world that we all play in, that you can't predict the people you're going to meet, but sometimes you just meet people that will open doors for you, that if you're willing to walk through those doors, the opportunity is there. And a big lesson that at least I've taken away, and I think Ravin's taken away, is that you have to be willing to walk through that door.
Yeah, and not walk through the doors you shouldn't walk through. It's like both and.
Yeah, if you
That's
knew
what makes
that,
it really hard.
if you knew that in hindsight, that'd be like really easy.
Well, yeah, one
Yeah,
of the things I've
exactly.
always found interesting is when people tell their kind of narrative about their life, it's usually in the here's what I did, and then I did, and then I did, and then I ended up at like a good place. And what is always unsaid is here are all the landmines that I missed. And a lot of times what screws people up is that, the best advice they say sometimes is reductive, i.e., don't smoke will end up helping your health a lot more than taking all these various supplements. So, unfortunately, it's that hard. You have to do the right things and avoid the wrong.
I like the visual of avoiding the landmine, or maybe you just jump from one landmine to the next landmine and you just build up the resilience that way.
Well, I'm
For
I'm
sure.
curious today when meet other big private equity guys that are 2 and 20 guys, or you're talking to maybe institutional capital or a pension fund. What do you get? What are people most surprised at? Like, is the no debt thing the bigger surprise? Is the whole time the bigger surprise? Like, what do people find? For the people who say no, I'm not actually into what you're doing, does it ever repel people because of
Oh,
that it's unique?
yeah. Oh my gosh, like people think we're idiots. And by the way, we are, just maybe not for that reason. But yeah, I mean, I would say the norm is when we first talked about fundraising, both for the first fund and the second fund, the norm is people being like, "You guys are the biggest idiots I've ever met. This is never going to work. Why would I give you for my money for 30 years?" Like I had one guy in particular, is hilarious. He said, "We thought we were done deal, like a big foundation." And so we flew the whole team there, and we get through 2 hours of meetings, discussions, and I said, "Okay, well, hey, are we going to move forward? Is this something you guys want to participate in?" He's like, "Oh, hell no. I would never invest in what you're doing." And we were like, "What? Why are we here?" And he goes, "I just wanted to meet the people that had the audacity to ask for you asked for." He goes, 30 years from now, heck, 20 years from now, you're going to be on your third wife. You're going to have stepkids all over the place. You're going to have 5 homes, blah, blah, blah. There's no way that this thing's going to work. And I was like, that seems like an oddly specific situation that you just outlined there, but
Yeah,
okay, maybe a little bit of projections going on.
yeah, mild projection.
But anyway, no, I would say the debt certainly, or the lack of debt is certainly a weird one for people. They're like, "Hey, can you not do math?" And I'm like, "No, I think we can do math all right." And we have a whole reason. We actually think that we make more money by not using debt than if we actually did use debt. And I think that the time horizon is another big one. And then of course the how we do fees is completely unique. It's not unusual, it's unique. There's literally no one else who does fees like us. So
Say more about why you think you'll make more money sans debt.
yeah. So, if you think about these small businesses, they're extremely volatile, right? Like I made the conclusion that all businesses are loosely functioning disasters, and some happen to make money. You get into the small end of the market, and they are extremely volatile. And so you're already buying an asset that, by the way, volatility works both directions, down and up. And that's one of the things we love about if you don't use debt, you actually welcome volatility. You welcome volatility in the industry. You welcome the volatility that comes with the company, because you get these big shocks up and down. But if you can withstand the down shocks, you get big upside shocks, right? It's much, much easier to grow a small business than to grow a big business. And so if you look at an average small business, it's doing well. It's on a good trajectory. You're going to have these shocks to the system. When everyone else has to zig and you can zag, you can make 10 years of progress in a year or 2 years. And I'll give you a great example of this. So we bought an aerospace business in the fall of 2019. When we bought it, literally everyone who was involved in the transaction was like, "You guys are idiots. I can't believe you're not going to use debt. Do you know that aerospace never goes down? It's either flat or up, always, right? Why would you not use debt?" This is a perfect example. We said, "Yeah, we're just not comfortable. We think there's plenty of volatility already built into the system. We're not going to do it." Now, of course, we didn't predict COVID. We're not that smart. We have no idea what's going to come. But we did know that something was going to come down the line. And it just so happened that thing wrecked the industry. I remember there was about a 5-month, 6-month period where the entire industry was down 70 to 80%. 70 to 80%, the entire industry.
Yeah, I mean, people were
Everyone
sitting in their homes, right? Like people
yeah,
weren't
no
doing
one could
anything.
fly. I
Yeah,
mean, like for that business, what actually matters is takeoffs and landings. And when you reduce takeoffs and landings by 70, 80%,
yeah.
maybe even 90% at certain times, that's it. So anyway, here we are. We're the only ones with cash on our balance sheet, no debt, and we have a fully loaded warehouse of unlevered assets. And so it's like, what are we going to do? Well, we were able to push the pedal down. We were able to hire. Everyone else is negotiating with their banks. We were able to implement a new ERP system. We never fired or laid off anybody. We were able to say to the whole team, hey, let's hunker down. Let's make all this progress that we want to make over the next 10 years. Let's just do it now. Well, that business now is 6 times the size as it was in 2019, 6x the size. Like we have some of the best talent in the industry now. And that business has catapulted from basically nowhere, this like tiny little sleepy small business, family owned business, to being like a real player in the space that they're in. How did they do it? Well, if we had debt, there's no way we would have been in the same situation everyone else was. Like I can use examples from almost every single one of the businesses of, when some big exogenous shock hits the system, we're fine. We're not panicked. We're able to make good long-term decisions. Somebody else who's got debt is trying to sell the business within 2 or 3 years. They've got to make a completely different set of decisions.
Yeah. Well, Brent, it sounds like you're almost taking a venture mindset versus a private equity mindset. It's all about convexity. If you talk
Yeah,
to your
sure.
traders talk about this idea is there's a 50% chance I may lose all my money. There's a 50% chance I may make 10x. And of course, it's hard to predict those outcomes, but obviously in that kind of situation, your expected value is going to be really attractive. And if you can minimize your downside by having less debt, then you can sort of bridge that zero scenario.
W- I'm
Exactly.
I'm curious because I mean, having founded and built a manufacturing company, which is probably just maybe on the too big for you guys potentially to buy, with the metrics you cited, but having lived through the situation of how insanely volatile it was, right? My question is, that is some, I mean, it's some like it's insane. Okay, what goes on inside these businesses that are doing two, $3, $5 million in EBITDA? Like, I don't know how when you're diligencing that, how you can almost believe anything because, right? Like, I honestly, how do you balance between okay, you got to believe in the CEO, you've got to underwrite the industry, like you add such an
Well,
element of just insanity
well, let me build on Ravin's question because I'd love to hear your perspective of just how you operate these businesses. Because at Stoke Lane, we are a holdco, and we do buy these companies that are pretty small, 500K up to maybe 2 or 3 million of EBITDA, but we do it as part of a tech-enabled roll-up strategy. So these are small companies that fit within a larger platform. So you have a corporate team and a CEO and management. So at least that's our thesis. But
Yeah.
this idea of managing these small companies independently, to me, just it's crazy. And so I'd love to understand how you actually do it.
Yeah. So it's been trial and error. I would say is every time we doubled in size, we broke all our systems, which is I think pretty common. And how we operated when we were 3, 4, 5 companies, how we operated when we were 10, 11 companies, and how we operate today are really kind of three independent phases. Right in the beginning, it was a very small team, all hands on deck. Everyone worked on everything, and it was just pure chaos. I'm laughing because the amount of pain and suffering in that phase was monumental. Like, I mean, glued to my phone, working 70, 80 hours a week, every single week. There was something on fire constantly. It was just pure chaos.
No, you're
And then you
smiling
start
like
getting
you enjoyed that period.
I did in some way. It's like the good old days or the bad old days. You're not quite which it was. Yeah, I mean, I'm smiling because I'm actually like as I'm telling you this, I'm remembering story after story of these crazy things that have happened. And anyway, and then like the second phase, I would say is we brought on operating partners that each had their own portfolio. So we kind of broke it up into like almost like a fractal model. And said, hey, we're going to have a team of resources that surround you, but we're going to have one person whose job is to be the kind of board of directors in a box is the way we described it. We have an incredible finance team that we kind of think of as the ministry of truth. Like what is objective truth, which by the way is a really hard thing. When you've got the CEO saying, hey, this is what truth is, you've got the operating partner saying this is what truth is, there's going to be disconnects between those. We need to have an independent group that says, no, 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 this is truth. Now come at me if you disagree, but we're going to be able to back it up.
I want to plug your annual letter, and I recommend anyone who listens to this go over to the Permanent uh, Capital website. And Brent has a letter called "Steady Progress and Self Reflection," um, and in it, the first big component of the letter is talking about the value of truth. And you quote Benjamin Franklin, and you say half a truth is often like a big lie. So
Yeah.
how often, especially when you're dealing with these tiny little businesses, like what you just said, it all sounds good, okay? But having seen a lot of businesses in that size, like, I mean, truth. I mean, but how can you really walk that walk?
Yeah, I mean, I would say we're trying to do the best we can, and we're never going to get truth. We're never going to get exactly what reality really is, but we're going to be able to approximate it. Right? It's the proximate. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get it to a proximate level where we think that we can predict behavior, predict outcomes within a range of outcomes that is reasonable. Like we think about it in terms of standard deviations. Right? We're trying to cut off the tails or at least cut off the left side of the tails. Hopefully, give us as much upside as we possibly can. And I think that's where every deal's different. I mean, you asked Ravin before about how do you diligence these things, and I would say it has been a tremendous amount of trial and error. I mean, we've peeked behind the curtain at over 10,000 companies. We've really dug in on probably a couple hundred at this point. And we're learning all the time. I mean, I joke that every time we do a deal, we find a new way to get screwed. And you sort of like learn, okay, when we see things that look like this and sound like this, then usually there's not one cockroach in the kitchen type thing. It's really a dance. Like it's not a science. It's way more art than science. And I mean, I would say, the joke in my world is unless a deal dies three times, you can't close it. There's this, constant pressure of, somebody's going to rug pull you. You're going to get to the finish line. They're going to say no or change the terms. And I mean, on about half the deals we've done, I've had to sit on the back porch swing with some founder owner and say, all right, man, we got a lot of cooks in the kitchen. Like you and I got to hash this thing out. We got to walk in and we got to tell them what reality is. And so, old Buffett quote of, I'm a better investor because I'm an operator. I'm a better operator because I'm an investor. I think what that leaves out is this kind of third stool or third leg of the stool, which is deal making. And I mean, deal making is a completely different art than investing and a completely different art than operating.
Well,
And I would say,
for
yeah,
sure, right? Because there's the huge sales component to it, interpersonal component to it. So, so Brent, what does permanent equity look like today in terms of number of companies that you're operating and maybe total revenue of all those companies and how many deals you're doing a year?
yeah. Yeah, so well, maybe to start with the last question first. So we're pretty, I mean, again, we're weird in every way. So everyone likes to have the vintage of fund model, which is like, hey, you invest now, we're going to put the capital out the door in this, next 2 to 3 years. Then we're going to go through 2 to 3 years of making them better, quote unquote, and then we're going to sell them all, right? And we're going to do the cycle over again. We don't do that. So we're not a vintage of fund model. We actually have a 10-year investment period. And so what we tell our investors is, look, we may do nothing for 5 years, and then we may deploy all the capital in 6 months. It just depends on whatever the market gives us. We only want to do good deals. So we had 16 companies. Now we have 15 companies. It's
Okay.
this very weird experience to have somebody give you cash and take responsibility. I'm used to the exact opposite of that. So it kind of felt great. It was a wonderful situation.
Was it like giving up one of your children in a way?
Yeah, in some ways. I mean, we'd never sold anything before, and so you got to understand how foreign that experience was to us. And it was a perfect situation where we had kind of taken it, with our leadership and with the guys who were running it, as far as we felt like we could really take it. There was a group that was much better in this area than we were, and had like big opportunities to integrate them into a bunch of their stuff. And everyone agreed it was the right decision. And so we were like, well, if we're not going to be the best owners for it, we want to be humble in that. um, yeah, we can of course, move forward and do that. And so it worked out well for them, worked out well for us. Hopefully, it works out well as a new team. So we had 16 down, we're down to 15. In terms of total revenue, gosh, I haven't looked at this in a while. My guess is we're at 550, $600 million of revenue, something like that. Maybe a little bit more than that now. We've got
But that's not
businesses
really, I
across the
mean,
country.
I assume you don't really care what the total revenue is because these are like in Al's business at Stoic Lane, I can imagine that that's a much more relevant metric because you're rolling it
Yeah.
up but in your case, these are disparate deals and it doesn't really matter
Yeah.
what the total is.
Yeah, and the margin's gonna be different in every business, and I mean, as we've seen all of these businesses, I mean, I'll never forget the first time, like, I saw a $200 million revenue business, and I was like, "Oh my gosh," my eyes got big, and I was like, "Can you imagine? That would be, so much revenue. Think about what you could do with all that revenue." And I saw their profit margins were like 3.5%, and I was
Yeah,
like, "Oh
yeah,
my god, that is a freaking nightmare."
yeah.
Like,
You're
yeah, I
talking
mean,
about
quote, unquote
a GMV business, right? You
yeah,
know,
on paper, it was like gonna make, $7 million, but it was, I mean, you talk about picking up pennies in front of a steamroller. One little tiny thing shifts and the whole bottom drops out and you lose everything. So, yeah, that's correct.
So the thing that I wonder about is I love how kind of principled you are in terms of like saying this is what we are and this is what we are not. My question is that as time goes on and you keep compounding, you're gonna get bigger. So either those companies are gonna grow organically, but at some point, are you going to formally close the fund and say, okay, now we've made enough money where we can buy the next one just with cash flow from continuing operations, like a Berkshire
Yeah.
sort of model? Like,
I don't know. The answer is I don't know. I mean, yes, if you play the math out, at some point it makes sense for us to do that if we want to keep, only playing in this lane. This honestly, people ask me like, "Hey, where's permanent equity going to be in 5 years?" I have no idea. If you'd asked me 5 years ago where we'd be today, I never would have guessed where we are today. If you'd asked me 5 years before that, I would have never guessed where we are. Honestly, like, we just want to do the next right thing. So we're going to keep doing that until it doesn't make sense, and then we'll go to our investors at some point and say, "Hey, we don't want to do this anymore with you. Would you be willing to do this with us?" Or, "Hey, we're going to take a break, and we're going to, we're we're never. I can't imagine us ever at this point. I mean, never say never, but just like selling the companies and returning capital and not being in partnership with our investors, because we have, I mean, we're perfectly designed. Each one of our funds operates as this independent holdco. And so, I mean, this sounds very meta, but if you want to think about permanent equity properly, it is that we're kind of like a holdco of holdcos. Each fund operates as its independent holdco. And so, we at some point will stop raising another holdco, but that doesn't mean that we won't keep operating the holdcos that we have now.
so how do you feel like it's going compared to, like you said, on the front end, you didn't necessarily envision this is where it's going to be, but given that you're here and you do have investors and you do have a long time frame, but at some point you have to return capital to your shareholders. Do you
Yeah.
feel like it's going well?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I I had pretty low expectations going into it, and maybe that's the key to a happy life is low
Well,
expectations.
well,
But I just heard not.
You've said Buffett. My favorite Munger line, and he's got some zingers there. Is the key to success in life is to be dependable and have low expectations.
Yeah, there you go. Well, I try to be both. Yeah, I would say I heard nightmare after nightmare story. I mean, I had so many people who were like, "You are the biggest idiot. You have no boss right now. You're making plenty of money. You're compounding a high rate of return. Why in the world would you take outside capital?" And so I just assumed that there was some boogeyman. I couldn't figure out where the boogeyman was going to come from, and boogeyman's never showed up. We've got great investors, and maybe as a result of um, the 30 years, the not using debt. I mean, let's put it this way. We are very we separate who like us from who don't. You're never just going to come into permanent equity as an investor because you just want to follow somebody else in. You got to be very convicted. And so we've got a great group of investors. Things have gone better than I had initially projected and expected. I think the power of compounding is something that's really difficult even for me to feel and understand what it actually means. Compounding in not just the financial side, but also in the relationship side. Like, we just have such great relationships that have been built over a long period of time now. I mean, there's plenty of bumps along the way. We made an investment that went to zero. We've made a couple others that have not gone great. We've had plenty of turmoil at the companies. We've had all kinds of crazy stuff happen with the leadership at our company. I mean, there's lots of volatility, but overall, when you kind of smooth it all together, put it all together, it's gone better than I ever expected it to.
what does your leadership team look like? I mean, how many partners? How many analysts?
Yeah, well, so this is really interesting. It depends on how you look at us. The core team is about a little over 20 people, but we also have a pretty large executive recruiting team that's in house, and we have an events team that's in house. So this event that we put on, we have 5 full-time people that work year round on that one event, that literally that one thing. People who've never put on a large scale festival style event will think that's crazy and will have no idea what they're talking about. Just try to do it. It is.
Why
It is
don't
hard.
you tell our audience just what
Yeah,
that event is?
I think it's a great great place to go. I was going to ask you actually how that came about.
Yeah. Man, I went to quite a few industry events, and they were all just highly transactional. Everyone's there looking over your shoulder, trying to sell you something. Just not very relational. The food was not great. Maybe you were in a, at best you were in a ballroom of a nice hotel. You got, coffee that was made 5 hours ago. The whole thing is everyone's, got a blue blazer on and is slinging business cards. And I just like, man, this sucks. I don't look forward to it. I don't feel good going to these things. And so I was like, is there a way to do things differently? Like, what would I want to attend? And I tried to look out and see if it was out there, and I couldn't find it. And this is, going back to 2017, 18, kind of in that time frame. And so I just decided to build it. And so Capital Camp was the first thing that came out of that, and it was a crazy 3 day. Michelin starred food, fireworks, like crazy, like blowout 3 days. And it was for investors. And then we added Main Street Summit, which is owners, investors, and operators of small to medium sized companies. And so we've actually combined those both events together. It's coming up in September of this year. We take over all downtown Columbia, Missouri. So people from all around the world, we had, I think, 16 countries there last year represented, and all across the country come in. And it's 3 days of every coffee shop and art gallery and bookshop is taken over in downtown Columbia. And we really are able to provide a glimpse into, middle Americana. And we have a beautiful, it's called the Missouri Theater that seats 1,200 people. And so we have, big speakers come in and small group discussions, and we put on an abundance of food and drinks. And it's a 3 day party. And my goal for it is relationships, friendships. I mean, my hope is I stand on stage every year and I say, hey, if you came here to go sell something, if you came here like that'll come. Like there's plenty of sales, plenty of big deals that have been done at these events. But the thing I'm most interested first in is find a friend, make a new friend, be you. And it's got I think it's got a very different feel. The feedback we get is it's a very different feel from a lot of conferences.
So we pride ourselves, we've only done a couple dozen episodes, and I feel like every one of our guests has been super unique. What's also very striking is how forward you are with your faith, Brent. And I watched anyone who Googles you, you have done entire podcasts where you talk about kind of your spirituality, your religion, Christianity. I find it super compelling. And maybe it's my phase of life with my kids. Like this is kind of top of mind stuff for me. So can you just kind of give us the synopsis of where you were? I heard the story about when you were a kid and where you are now.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe me, it would have been the most unlikely thing if you'd asked me, 12 years ago, what I'd be talking about on a podcast. This would be the least likely thing. I was a hardcore atheist. I was definitely was Hawkins, or Hitchens, Dawkins, like that style, new atheist, kind of bombastic. I thought
So you didn't grow up with religion at all, or you did?
I told my mom I didn't believe in God when I was 9. I can still remember it. I was in the front seat of her car and I said, "Mom, I just want to tell you I don't believe in God." And my brother, I distinctly remember this because my brother starts crying in the back seat.
Because the family is religious or was religious.
So I would say we went to church every 2, 3, 4 Sundays. Joplin, Missouri is like the buckle of the Bible Belt. Like sort of especially, growing up in the 80s and 90s, like it felt like that was the thing that a lot of people did. I mean, I kept hearing about all the stuff. It seemed crazy to me. I never understood what the point of it was. And so I just had rejected it. It wasn't like I was like adamantly atheist and like going out and like, I don't know if they're like atheist rallies or something, but like, it wasn't like I was like that.
Well, I
But
think
like,
I think there definitely are some of those. I'm not sure you want to be
yeah.
one of those.
Well, anyway,
I don't think that's the crowd that at his event.
Yeah, that's not the crowd. Yeah, but anyway, so I just remember it just wasn't a part of my life. And in my head, what the purpose of life is to win, to achieve. And if you made a lot of money and you were successful, you would matter, you'd belong. And so I spent my 20s. I mean, I put on, this is kind of where my health journey intersects with this. I put on 55, 60 pounds in my 20s. I was maniacally focused on winning and on building and making money. I got to my late 20s and had won a bunch of awards, and I was the young entrepreneur of this and that. And we were Inc. 500. And I got invited to the White House to advise on entrepreneurship policy, and I mean, it was just kind of going and blowing. I started getting invited to all these clubs and national organizations, and um, I just felt empty inside. I can
Were
remember
you
thinking
married? Were
I
you
was
married?
married. Yeah, yeah, I was married. I told my wife I didn't love her. We almost got divorced twice. I started distancing myself from all my friends. It was a really dark time for me. I mean, I can look back on it now and say, um, it was like success induced
I mean,
depression is the
depression,
best way I
yeah.
can say it.
And
Yeah.
had you had bouts of depression previously, or was this just like I got to this point, and maybe we've talked about this actually, that if you set a goal, sometimes when you reach that goal, then you don't really know what to do. And Ravin and
Yeah.
I kind of joked that we started a podcast, but
Yeah.
it is something that I think that a lot of us deal with is you get to this point, you think everything is going to be amazing, and
Yeah.
it kind of disappoints.
Well, and I won't even take that one step deeper because we have talked about like this anticlimax if you set a big goal and achieve it. But I want to go deeper in the sense of one of my sons, beat you in the sense of I think he was 5 or 6 when he gave me the God is a myth speech. And I was, a little surprised. And I'm kind of at this phase of life where I honestly hope that they get some kind of a awakening, meaning, et cetera. So I'm very curious about what was for you. It sounds like you in your late 20s and you've gone so kind of far into it. It's such a core part of who you are. And I think even your business, like what happened?
Yeah, I mean, so I was at my low, and all of a sudden I started meeting these people that were just so different. They were free, they were light, they were joyful, they were loving, and I was like, I mean, I literally would ask them, I like, what is it? What do you have? Like, what's the thing? Like, how are you the way you are? And they say, oh, I follow Jesus. And I was like, you gotta be freaking kidding me. I didn't say freaking at the time. It was the other F word.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, there's no way that's the thing. And they would say, no, 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 like I was as lost as you say you are, and then I got rescued. And I'd be like, okay, I don't, how can a dead guy from 2,000 years ago rescue you? And like, how could you even know anything that happened 2,000 years ago? Like, I can't remember what I had for lunch yesterday. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. And so I started just meeting these people, and I met a lot of them within a short period of time. And I got to be honest, their lives and how they lived, they just lived differently than me, and they had a way better life than I had. That was the first thing that hit me was they just had a way better life. And then I started talking to them, and they would challenge me and say, "Well, wait a minute, why do you, where do you think meaning comes from? Are you just going to invent meaning? Where do you think are there actually objective morality?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, of course there's right and wrong." Like, "Okay, great. Where does that come from?" I couldn't answer it. And it was really disturbing for me. I mean, it kind of almost like sent me into another tailspin of like, I mean, I kind of went from like depression into like nihilism because I'm like, well, crap. The more I realize, like, I don't actually believe anything. I came from nothing. I'm going to nothing. Like, I'm kind of the outgrowth of pond scum. How does that make sense?
I think
Like,
Yeah.
what you
why,
just described, I literally think what you just described is probably the most popular view amongst like these, whatever we call them, Gen Alpha or something like that.
there's a lot of this stuff that I struggle with. I actually wrote, I have never published it. I may never publish it, but I actually wrote something called Notes Along the Way that was literally the notes I took in my move from atheism to being a believer. Because it was so jarring. I had to like keep track of where my mind was and like, what are the arguments and what do I believe and what do I not believe? And anyway, so it's
Well,
like a 55-page Google Doc.
publish that ASAP because I think
Well,
it'll help. But B, and I saw you say at some point you came home and you told your wife it's all true. All this
Yeah.
stuff that
Yeah.
people that is all true. Like, and did that just it hit you like a lightning bolt?
Yeah, I mean, so I went through about 2.5 years of I read everything I could possibly read, trying to disprove it. I mean, I really set out to be like, okay, this is bullshit. We all know it's bullshit. There's no way that there's a God that we could know. If there's a God, distant, the watchmaker, clockmaker type guy. And then I started actually digging into the evidence around was Jesus a real person? And turns out a lot of the stuff is actually historically verifiable. And at some point, I kind of went from it's an impossibility to it's a plausibility to it's a probability. And then I remember one day, like everything kind of clicked together. And I don't believe. So my experience is I had to have the logic and reason loosen my grip on atheism. I think God ultimately has to grab your heart. And so ultimately God gave me eyes to see, and I came home and I was like, this changes everything. And man, I can still remember that day. Everything just went technicolor. And like all of a sudden, everything started changing in
So,
my life. Now I was still me. I still screwed up. I still am.
so I
But
guess
like,
that was going to be my
yeah.
question. So, how has that changed your day to day life? In what ways?
Oh my gosh. I mean, just the inner peace that I feel. I didn't know what love actually was until God found me, because there's actually a rabbi, Rabbi Heschel. He describes it's called fish love, where he's like, you sit down and you eat a piece of fish and you're like, oh, I love this fish. Well, like, what are you saying? I love how the fish tastes. I love how the fish makes me feel. I appreciate what the fish is doing for me. That is how I pictured love. Like, that is what I thought love was, okay, well, I appreciate the things that you do for me. If you do those things for me, more of those things and better, then I love you more. And what God showed me was, no, 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 no. A creator of the universe who loves me because he loves me. He knew me before time. He knitted me together in my mother's womb. He has made me uniquely, fearfully, and wonderfully made, right? Like, these things, as I read them and they started sinking into my heart, it totally changed how I viewed myself. It totally changed what I expected of me. I didn't have to perform to matter and belong. Like, I mattered and belonged because I was adopted into God's family. It totally just reorientated my entire worldview. And then I was able to love my wife with a love that I had been given then that I didn't have before. And all of a sudden she starts responding to me differently. And my friends, all of a sudden I have this like desire to just genuinely care for them and to provide for them and to love on them. And they're like, that is a totally different Brent. I mean, I used to be so transactional. It was all, what could you give me? What could you do for me? Okay, I'll be nice to you. But I was like, I wasn't, my
So,
friends weren't friends. They were helpers for me. I needed affirmation.
so, Brent, let me ask you this question because I've been following some of your Twitter or X articles that you've been writing, which is
Yeah.
relatively new for you, right? Over the last.
Yeah. Well, I used to write a lot. That's actually how I attracted all this investment, all these things. And then I stopped writing for about 5 or 6 years. Yeah.
And then I think this past year or so, you've been writing these articles, and I'm fascinated by what you mean here. And I'm just pulling up the one from March that I believe you published: Three Walls Between You and Ruin.
Hmm.
Here's how to build the walls before the flood comes, because the flood is coming. It comes for all of us in one form or another. The question is whether what you've already built is strong enough to survive it.
Yeah, the light and heavy, the light stuff here, the fluffy stuff of life.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, it comes from a deep. I'm going to try not to get choked up talking about it. I've seen more pain and suffering in the last couple of years. Maybe it's just the age I'm at. I'm 43. It feels
You're a
like that.
youngin on this podcast.
I'm
Um,
52, so that next 9 years is going to be amazing. Let me tell you.
yeah, well, I tell you what, I've seen more lives blow up. Um, People cutting corners, getting caught, um, facing jail time. I've seen addiction issues, horrible hidden addiction issues, infidelity, guys walking away from their families, just couldn't handle the pressure anymore, just detonated. Um, and these are guys that have been close to me through the years. And man, I've saw it across the table from more guys that are just broken and they're weeping and their whole life, like they tried to hide, they tried to put on a mask. And these are the guys that, man, you thought they had everything. I mean, their wives are beautiful, their families are perfect. A lot of them are going to church, a lot of them are running businesses. And it just over and over again broken my heart. I mean, and look, I
And
feel the same
these were
pulse.
religious, faith oriented people, and yet having the mask and still living a lie in some sense.
Yeah, I mean, I would say one of the favorite hiding places of people who are masked up is in religion. I think there's a real temptation to
Interesting.
swap out one set of mask wearing for another. And you go from, hey, I'm gonna live for myself. We're gonna go party on the weekends, Dan Blazarian style, like whatever, let's go. And you swap that out for a completely different form of mask wearing, which is look how upright I am and how perfect I am, and we're all shiny and like we're happy and everything's wonderful.
Well, I guess
And
we're
then you
all
start,
looking for our idols, right? We're always constantly looking. It's like whether
yeah,
it's, the gym or the meditation or religion maybe is in that same
yeah.
vein of like trying to find meaning.
Yeah, well, I think that what we're trying to do is we're trying to find something to soothe us so that we matter and belong and something that we can hold on to. There's all these secrets that they had, things that they shouldn't have been doing, things that they felt like they couldn't tell anybody. And it wasn't like all of a sudden, like no one goes from being in a happy marriage to waking up in somebody else's bed. Right. Like no one does that. Right. What happens is it's a little step here and a little step there. Like no one gets addicted to something overnight. Right. It's like, well, it's a little help here. It's a little help there. I had a a back problem and I'm just going to take a little something to help me. Well, that makes me feel a little good. Or, hey, I just need a little help to, perform a little bit better at my job. And all of a sudden you've got this stuff and you feel like a fraud, right? You feel like if anybody actually knew who I was, no one would love me. And the problem is as soon as we put on that mask, every bad thing gets through, hits us, and every good thing gets hit the mask because the mask says, well, no, 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 if you only knew me. If you really knew me, you wouldn't actually say that. And so you just see guys like rotting from the inside out. And they rot and rot and rot, and they're terrified. I was in darkness. I was lost. I was addicted to pornography. I had all kinds of I was a functioning alcoholic pretty much
Well,
at that point in my life.
you've written about
You're talking about yourself, not your
I'm
friend.
talking about myself.
By the way,
I'm talking about myself.
you've written about this, right? In some,
Yeah.
and I've read some of the letters, but I know you've gone very deep on
It's
yourself.
amazing. I just love the honesty because I do feel that people who have had the journey you've had, it is disarming honesty with and in a way it's so I don't know, I just think society needs more of it because I do think that especially with phones and social media and influencers, like there is just such a lie that of false happiness that you see all over the current world today.
Yeah, everyone's pretending. And here's the thing. I mean, I would say objectively, I mean, look, I love my wife. We've never had a better relationship. Am I still tempted towards sin and sexual sin? 100%. And it hurts me and it hurts her. Right. Do I still struggle today? Absolutely. And I mean, I don't think any man, I look, it takes a long time to break addictions. It takes a long time to break patterns. And I mean, this is after, 12 years of intense repenting. Now I can say, have I come a long way? Am I totally different than what I was before? 100%. I stopped drinking. I like my health journey. I mean, I've lost
Oh, yeah, how
65
long have you
pounds.
how long have you stopped drinking for?
Let's see. I stopped drinking in 2021. Now I went through a couple years where I didn't drink anything, and then I think I drank. Year before last, I think I had 7 or 8 drinks in the whole year. Maybe last year I had 15, 20 drinks. I'm actually becoming a little bit more liberal just because I can handle it now. I can actually go out and have 2 drinks with friends, and it's not 7 or 8 drinks. Like it's amazing, and like I don't come home every night and feel like in order to unwind, I need to have 3 or 4 glasses of wine
Well,
and a bourbon.
Well, so
You know.
Ravin made this comment that this is what Gen Alpha is feeling, this nihilism. I'm not sure if that's actually true or not true, but I'd love to kind of take this broader, given that you've been down this journey, and clearly there's been just a broad movement in terms of drinking less for
Yeah.
this younger generation, especially, is drinking far less than. I'm 45. Ravin is a few years older than me. And our generation, call it Gen Xers, I think we drink something like 8 to 10 times more than this younger generation, Gen Alpha or Gen Z. And you
Yeah,
know,
well,
the,
okay, they're drinking less, but they're dating less.
Oh yeah,
no,
they're
but,
doing
They're
everything less.
living
but
less.
this is where I was. This is
Like,
where I was
there's
going.
a lot
Actually,
of weird data that's going on in this generation.
well, this is exactly where I was going. So I think you caught the point. Is that this Gen Z generation of ours, drank a lot and was pretty productive, built a bunch of stuff, got out there in the world, got married, had kids. The higher generations, our elder generations, they fought wars, they created this American system, this country that we all get to benefit from and live in. What is this younger generation facing in this kind of new society that has challenges coming from every angle, right? Too much technology and this nihilism and not dating. Like, what is your view on that whole? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if I said that up correctly, but
And is the answer in the Bible, really?
I think, well, it's interesting the stats that I've actually recently seen and anecdotally from what I've seen here locally and talked with different church organizations. I mean, the single biggest mover in the entire faith world right now is young people coming into the church in droves. Like it is crazy. It is a massive reaction to what we saw, I would call like from 2017 to 2022. I mean, I don't want to go too far and get too political, but like, man, it felt like the world lost its mind for about 5 years there. And I think they are a reaction. The next generation
Are
is
you
always a
referring
reaction
to
to the previous
wokeism,
generation.
like crazy
Yeah,
woke?
just like just woke, all the woke stuff, and like how we
But
couldn't like tell the truth about anything. I mean, obviously, just even take like mask wearing is like my wife's a PhD in molecular microbiology and immunology, and I remember when the mask mandates came out, she was like, "Cloth masks literally don't do anything."
Oh,
She's like,
you're
"What are we
you know what,
talking about?"
you're rehashing a bunch of like, these chats that Ravin and I and a number of our friends in this YPO group that we were together that we had for years.
well, let's not get dragged into that. I think we're all pretty much in agreement.
That'd be so fun.
But what I want to get from Brent is, so let's all agree that there was a horrendous, you know, kind lies told instead of unkind truths. Okay.
That's
And I
correct.
would argue that we're still in that phase right now. Let's also agree that the church might be a place of respite for some of that, right? Because
Yep.
you go in because you're devoid of meaning and you're kind of filled up. Okay. So now I want to ask a question probably on behalf of my kids who are still exploring. And what they would probably say, because one of them is in fact in a religion class at school, like
Sure.
at the moment, they would basically say, look, religions, all the great religions, all essentially say the same thing. You know, the golden rule, be a good person. And if you don't, then there's like a bad consequence. And one of my sons has made the point to me, you know, I love the golden rule element of things, but the fear based part of it is what gets me, because I don't, with what I know about history, you know, and scaring people. If like, how do you reconcile, like, and I'm bringing this in the idea of truth, because
Yep.
we went to Egypt. Okay. I brought my kids there and we saw the pyramids and we know those things are 5,000 years old. And then when we talked about the Bible, he's like, well, hold on, these were 3,000 years before that stuff. Like, are you, if you're talking to my kids, will you expand the point to be all religion, if devoted, are good because they're saying the same things? I guess that's the question.
Yeah. Well, so it's funny hearing you talk about what your kids believe. It sounds, I mean, I can literally hear myself. I said those very words. So I would say to them, I have a tremendous heart for where they are. And believe me, I thought the exact same things. Here's what I'd say is I thought that all religions taught the same thing until I actually studied religions. It's funny. There's a great book. I'm actually going to prop it up here called The World's Religions, which actually talks about all the major religions in the world and what do they actually believe. And so I think it does a disservice to all faiths if you say all faiths are basically the same and the golden rule. And what I would say though is a lot of them share a commonality. Your son is correct in saying that when I would call religion is if you do these things, there's a certain set of rules. If you do these things, then I'll give you favor in this life and the next, right? Like that would be, I would call a classical definition of religion. That is also, by the way, the definition of religion that I thought that's what Christianity was. And that's what I rejected because I was like, okay, how do I know if I did enough? And like, how do I know if I didn't do enough of the other? And is it kind of like a weighing machine?
Yeah, like
Like
false
it,
belief, Pascal's
it,
wager.
yeah, it just doesn't make sense to me. And I still remember when I heard the gospel for the first time. Because I said something, I was in a group of guys and we were talking about faith stuff. And I said, yeah, I just need to work harder, get my scales to align better. And they were like, that's not the gospel, right? And I said, come again. What? And they said, no, 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 no. The gospel is you can't earn anything. It is God's free gift of grace. Jesus on the cross took, it's called substitutionary atonement, took every sin, past, present, future. You are completely and freely forgiven. And from that place of forgiveness, you have complete freedom to go forth in the world. Complete freedom. So I'm completely forgiven. I don't have to work for anything. In fact, God does not relate to me based on my sin. God does not relate to me based on my good works, which, by the way, was so offensive to me. I got angry and almost had to leave that group. You know why? Because I'd worked my ass off my whole life to do good. I had all these good works that I had done. Are you telling me none of that stuff mattered? And they're like, no, none of it matters. God's got this gift. Your creator says, hey, I love you. I want a relationship with you. I paid all of it on the cross. And so that actually is the unique feature of Christianity, of following Jesus, that is unlike any other religion in the world. That honestly is the linchpin. That is the thing that got me. That is the thing that I did
That
not find
God
anywhere else.
gave
I
his
studied,
son for our sins.
yeah, and this idea of pure grace, like I didn't earn, like I'm not a Christian because I studied harder. I'm not a Christian because I earned it somehow. I don't earn my way to heaven. Like if I give $100 billion to charity, or buy like every Ferrari ever made, like it doesn't matter. That doesn't matter to God. Now, what God says is, hey, if you love me, then you love me and love my people. So it's from this outpouring. It's like I can't give away what I don't have. I have to be filled with God's love, which is unconditional, which loves me for me, knew me, sees me. Well, now it's completely transformed how I think about every relationship, how I think about my work. I mean, I can sit across from somebody who I'm in litigation with, and I can say, okay, perhaps the reason why I'm in litigation is because I need to tell them the good news, that I need to tell them that they are loved.
Oh,
And
man,
even though
that
they're coming after me, like,
yeah.
I don't know, maybe that's the reason why I'm there.
I have some litigation in Chicago in my old real estate company. I would love to use
I
your
was like,
Yeah.
bring in Brent. Brent, I think that's a better tech.
Yeah.
I mean, you are so passionate. It's so compelling, frankly. Like, how is it that you're able to actually do all these deals? And like, I almost feel like when you're doing the event with 1,500 people, like part
Yeah.
of me feels like, can you go 50-50 where it's permanent equity is like the vehicle with which you can actually spread the good word?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't look at it as it's a tension between these things at all. This is who I am, and so everywhere I go, I am the same person. And by the way, I screw up all the time, and I have to apologize all the time. Like I am not. I don't want this to come across as like I'm some saint. I'm not. Like I get angry and frustrated and selfish and self-centered and self-reliant and all the things, right? But man, more often than not, I get to bring heaven, and I get to take these incredible resources that God's given me. I mean, look, I'm the Forrest Gump of private equity. I do not deserve to have a
Brent,
private equity firm.
that may be the name of the episode right there.
I think that is, well, I look, this is, like I said, we pride ourselves on having there's been very little repetition thus far. And I think that we have completely checked that box. Brent, we do have a lightning round. Do you think that AI are you on the techno optimist side or the doomer side as it relates to AI?
I wrote 3 philosophical pieces about AI literally on this topic because I've been wrestling with this. I actually have an optimism that if you look at the Industrial Revolution made men into machines, my hope is that by taking the temptation and the ability for men to be machines and for machines to do the machine work, that is actually going to unlock our ability to be human again and to focus on relationships and wisdom and discernment and all the things that make us human. So I'm actually fairly optimistic about it.
That's an
Well,
optimist.
hopefully it doesn't make for a lot more nihilists.
This is has been a really cool episode. I just feel like that a lot the people who watch this are going to start off hearing, hey, what's your edge with the GPs and the fees, and then we end up with this, very deep sort of spiritual discussions.
I assume you're hearing all the same noise about private credit and you don't use debt, which is awesome. But what do you think is the state of the economy currently?
I think it's in a little bit tougher place than most people expect. Anything that has to do with bigger, like heavier assets, I would say is in trouble outside of data centers. If you're in the data center space or data center adjacent, it's bonanza.
So Ravin and I have kids that are in middle school, and obviously we have a lot of friends whose kids are a little bit older. They're in college or they're coming out of college. What are they all going to be doing in this whole AI world, given that you constantly hear that there are no jobs for kids coming out of undergrad?
Yeah, I mean, the answer is I don't know. What I will say is that we have a remarkable history that every time technology comes, there are people who are displaced, there is pain, but it does create an abundance and more jobs than we've ever had. Everyone likes to say this time's different. I'm going to go ahead and bet that this time isn't different, and that that technology is going to create even further abundance.
Well, hopefully humanity will adapt like it's always adapted. I'm with you. I think Jevons paradox is this concept that as technology enables more productivity and drives the cost of everything down, humans just consume more and we find more creative ways to deploy our capability. And there's a great book, by the way, This Time is Different, which I don't know if that's what you were referring to, that talking
Yeah.
about financial history, that every time you say, oh, no, we'll
Yep.
never have another recession again. And it goes through, centuries of this time is different and it's never that different. Anyway, I agree.
I'm very curious how AI will impact religion and the spiritual stuff. Like when you have an LLM that knows like the gospel, every
Yeah.
version of the Bible, and like, will it become this wise thing? Can you train an LLM on all like religion writings?
Well, Brent, this has been fascinating. I got to get my butt to Capital Camp at some point.
Yeah, you guys are invited.
Yeah, so it'd be a lot of fun. We can compare notes there. But thanks for spending time with us.
Yeah, sounds great. Hey, really appreciate you guys. Thanks again.
Awesome. Take care, guys.